this is my idea of what happens when you have a meeting that's 3 days long, is that by the time we get to today, we look like this young guy. You know, he's all excited about the pancakes. And do you think he can actually eat these and get them down? That's how I feel. I don't know how you feel. Okay, so we've been highly overstimulated. So what we're going to try to do here today is talk something that's not about trying to fix a problem today. Because what we want to do is expose a little bit of the thinking of our board of directors of the Institute and what we really keeps us up at night, what we worry about in terms of what we might call an industry, which we all know it's not an industry. I don't know what it is, but it's a sector of our economy and a sector of our life in which we spend a lot of time thinking about its problems and its challenges. So we're going to hopefully impart some of that today. The other thing I'd like to say is life is more than just fixing problems. And part of your role as a leader in health and human services is to inspire other people to solve problems. Your customers, your clients, your employees. And so this is a little bit of a message about how you might have to change up how you think, how you're thinking, and how you want the people who work for you, with you, to also be thinking. Because it's going to take that kind of process in order to change this or turn this battleship in the bathtub, if that's what we intend to do. So let's meet our panel here for a minute. So you can all read in the bios, you know, the detail, and I would say, you know, Paul here is, what do they call you? Pretty, doer, driver, thinker, something like that? Top 25? And I would say it's in IT, but it's really information as opposed to technology. So that's what his legacy is. Sid is actually a former member of the administration of HEW. How many people are old enough to have worked for HEW? How many even know what it is? Health, education, and welfare. So as I say to most people who are pioneers, they have arrows in their back and in their front, you know, both sides. And then, of course, we have Vernon, who is really one of the foot soldiers. I mean, he's actually out there doing battle. And so he's probably the more practical realist of what it's like to be out there trying to provide a service. Okay? And I'm pretty much a really, hopefully, an astute observer of chaos for about 40 years in the health and human services, trying to do the best I possibly can with the resources I have available to me to inspire people to maybe perhaps do something different. I don't mean leave the field, but within that area, think outside, as we say, the box, but you know, kind of remind yourself why you're doing this. Yeah, you get paid for it, and yes, it's a job. We probably would all assess the reason we've had anything to do with health and human services is a much deeper kind of value set that's inside ourself that drives us this. So with that in mind, let's move forward here and show you what we're going to try to do today. Now, I know it's the third day. What we want you to do is relax a little bit, loosen up. If you have a tie on, loosen it up, and be willing to blurt things out. Now for Ivan, blurt means a couple of words, okay? Just a couple words, okay? No speeches, but what we want you to do is feel relaxed. This is like teaching, you know, students a foreign language. If you make it too imposing, they're never going to blurt out what they think the word means, right? So what I want you to do as we go through this is engage with our panelists and be willing to yell out what you think you're going to see on the screen, your reaction to it. Tell us what you think it means. Get used to doing this because that's what the future is going to be like. We're not going to have the luxury to study things to death. And so we're going to get really, what I would call really great images of the future that get flashed to us. It's sort of like being Twitterized, okay? We have to learn how to be able to take that in and react to it. Otherwise, we'll become paralyzed. So let me see if I can work the clicker and the microphone. This is really tricky. Okay. Well, if that doesn't work, we'll do this. Michael? Okay. So this is where we all start off, right? We have all these questions, all these concerns. We don't know which way we're going from time to time. And that's what my morning usually starts off. I mean, I do prepare, and we all sort of think about how we're going to get prepared, but this is what it looks like. And I would say your vision of what you're doing is really a byproduct of what you know today and what you think is going to happen tomorrow. There's no magic to this. But it is something that requires some quiet time to think about what exactly you're trying to affect. What are you trying to change? What are you trying to improve? And more importantly, where are you going? Now, this is the problem we all face today. You know, for 40 years, I thought there was a fork in the road. You know, and that was a lie. Okay? This is what it looks like. Now, the only danger here is, can you get out there and pick up as many as you need to pick up without getting killed or run over, right? So I'm saying I don't want to minimize anything you're going to hear us say, but the choices are almost endless. And so we got to make a lot of choices. What we were saying over the last couple of days, if you're going to pay a lot of money for a system, well, make it fail real fast, so then you can get on to the next one. So this is true about these choices that we get to make, and we get to make them for ourselves, our families, the clients we serve, the patients we serve. But it's not a simple process. It requires one that has a lot of energy in our heads. The other thing is, it's important what you build. It's important what you think you're building. Now, this is one of my vacation homes. Okay, so, I mean, you can see it. It's limited by space. It's got wheels on it. It's parked in a nice location. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Like, 99 square feet. You could really do a lot in that, right? If that's what's in your head, you have to decide whether this might be more functional. And this could actually last for a couple generations, and it could serve a lot of families or one family with a lot of people and do a lot of different things, right? It's really important what you have up here about what it is you're trying to do. Because if you don't, those two images are grossly different. They're either going to make you fail if it's the wrong challenge, or it's going to make you succeed if it's the right idea. So what we're going to do here, Sid, I'm going to start off with you and say, look at this for a minute. Now, if it didn't have numbers on it, what does it look like to you? Blurt that out. What does it look like? Ink blot. Sid, tell us what it means to you.
Well, I get intergenerational interdependency. The people on the bottom and the people on the top depend more on each other than current realities seem to reflect. We know, Emily told us yesterday in talking about risk factors that we know at birth. We know a lot more about the people on the bottom than we are acting on by knowing all those risk factors and having the information systems that could tell us what to do about the fact that 1 out of 3 of those people on the bottom is not ready to participate in the American economy in a way to keep resources flowing to the people on the top who are going to command more and more of them. So the interdependency is, how do we make sure that we're doing at the bottom what we need to do at the top, and also how do we make sure that cost consciousness about how expensive the people who are at and near the top, how much that impairs our ability to work on the people at the bottom. We know a great deal, Emily and others have said, at the point of birth, with Medicaid covering 45% of all births in this country, we know at birth, in some cases, we know with good prenatal screening before those babies are born, what their odds are of participating effectively in the economy in ways that will affect the well-being of people way up at the top. We've got to have more of a sense of holistic approach. Information can help us with that. Political will have a lot to do with it as well.
So how many of you will be alive and well and probably mentally able in 2060? Raise your hand if you think 2060. 2060. Yeah, 2060. Yeah, with that.
Everybody's sitting right.
That's called, hey Jerry, that's called a myth.
Heads, you're in trouble.
Is there anybody in the room that will still be in the workforce when they're 2060? Is there anybody here? Okay, would you Okay, stand up if you think you'll be in the workforce in 2060. Okay, so I know this is a stretch, right? But these are the experts of government who are saying, you know, and of all the people who have some really good data, it's the Census Bureau. I mean, they're really quite anal about going about this, right? And if everything goes like they think it goes, and it typically does in that department, look what I mean, this is what it's going to produce. So I'm saying, do you feel good about how you're going to be in 2060? I mean, you know, I think that's 46 years from, is it 46 years from today? Something like that? Right. So this is a future that we today are in some way going to plan for. We're not even going to be here. Maybe you're thinking that's a good thing. Right. So I call this my big tent slide. It looks to me like a theater. It looks like, you know, a curtain, doesn't it? Okay. Okay, now Vernon. Now we want to try to be as compassionate as we can, but we want to be provocative. We want to maybe get you agitated. That'd be good. Ivan, take it easy, you know. But we want to be compassionate about this. Tell us what this says to you.
Well, this has already happened in California.
Can everybody see this so far? This tells you what's going to happen in tipping of the minority population here. So the red line is people under 18, and then the other line is everybody.
Right, so in terms of just the ethnicity of the population in California, that's already happened. For the work that I do on a day-to-day basis in California, our future is the kind of the deprofessionalization of the field. In other words, how do you take those that have been consumers and then they themselves become enablers and service providers as well? So we see that with transitional age youth, working with their own peer groups around how they themselves support their transition. We see the way in which paraprofessionals are working with new mothers in communities. I think that's where we have to really think about ways in which we're relevant in communities. And then I think Sid's very clearly identified the issue of how are we supporting young people's educational capacity and their capacity to be able to generate income for those that are going to be around in 2060, right?
So Paul, how many systems are we going to need here? Are we going to need?
We also need to look at the fact that those same millennials are going to be our eligibility workers for the next foreseeable future. And the tools they want to use are not the tools we've had for the last 20 years. You know, they use things like this. Absolutely.
How many people here are right now building dual systems in 2 different languages? Building websites in 2 different languages. How many in 3? Got anything planning for 3? What do you think about that, Sid?
But Sid, at the same point, this guy's got to deal with a local administration. You know, how many languages do you have to support? 40. 40 languages.
Yeah, so you have websites in 40 languages?
Right. So I think what you're saying is we have to be it has to be relevant. The service delivery system has to reflect the needs of the populations that are coming forward.
We became a country of a majority of minorities. So the reality is the WASP model that worked okay as a service delivery model for many, many years will not work any further.
Right.
Well, that's well said, but that's also an indictment, isn't it? I mean, if you think about connecting your vision with the practicality of the systems that you're engaged in building, of which the rules are telling you how to build them, you know, something's out of sync here. I mean, you know, we learned yesterday that the Google folks said don't spend any time integrating anything. Interesting observation, wasn't it? So, Paul, what do you think of that?
Well, I think we need a new language. It's not a matter of using words like integration, which have a meaning determined by ages past. You know, we still need to talk about interoperability and integration, but making use of the kind of decentralized capabilities that we have today in technologies. It's not a matter of building one big computer and putting everything in it anymore. We know better. We can have distributed systems that can be linked together with the proper identification authority and privilege authority to share information without really doing the same kinds of integration that we did in the past.
Did you all catch that statement yesterday? Did that go by you, or kind of startled me? Because we've talked a lot about integration, IT integration, service integration, and so this might be a signal to us that something's changed. Now, remember these colors if you can. This is a test. Test is coming up. This is an eye test. If you're colorblind, I think we're going to be in trouble. Or you're going to be in trouble. Okay? Got those colors? Okay, here's some cities. And can anybody blurt out, okay, start on the left and the upper side and tell me what city you're looking at. How many believe it's New York? Okay, so what are those colors are suggesting to you? Blurt this out. Anybody? What do you think about that? Huh? Top left? Does this have any implication to what you have to do if you were in that city? Yes. How about the second one, the second panel? What city's that? Pardon? No, go that way. Go that way. On the top row, from left to right. What's that city? Bzzz. Come on. Oh, you know, we're really close to it. There you go. Okay, ding, 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 ding. Yeah, DC. Now, how does that look to you? Now, you're going to think about now you're going to be delivering services. Now, these are images from the 2000 census. And these are the kinds of images that, of course, GIS technology can help you build. But what they are is they're really demographic art, if you think about it. You could put these on your wall of your house. But they also have an implication to how we might go about building our health and human service environment. What's the third panel? What's the third city? Holler it, come on. Who said San Francisco? Right, that is correct, San Francisco. Now, does San Francisco have some traits that look like New York? Uh-huh. Now, what is it telling you what's happening here? Does this look like a homogeneous country to you? Do you think the problems and the solutions are kind of cookie cutter? That if somebody puts out something in the Federal Register, it's going to work the same way in all those cities? Okay, how about the last panel? South Carolina, boy, that's a... Okay, so there's a person with imagination. That's imagination at work. Okay, so the panel, have you got any clue what that is? Detroit. That's Detroit, Michigan. Yeah. Okay, let's drop down to the bottom. Okay. What's that one? This one right here now, folks. Come on. L.A. Okay. Now, does that contrast a little bit what's up on top? What does it suggest to you? This one right here.
It's also more segregated than a lot of Detroit, and those are actually quite segregated.
Yeah, and you're starting to pick up on some of the subtle effects of the art. How about this one? What city are we talking about here? Big Tea Party state. Boy, some got close. Panelists, what is that city? San Antonio. San Antonio. And then the last panel, and then we're finished with the test. Houston. Houston. Now, many different, you could look at these and come up with all sorts of interesting ideas, but what this is really saying is, okay, so if our solutions are pegged to some image that's in our head, that first of all, that we're not and I'm going to use this term in a very non-technical term, but a segregated village we're fixing, and the people that live in it, it's going to be very different in all these cities, because we now know that how we distribute our population has a lot to do with the problems we're going to have to solve and the ability of that population to be recovered, to be resilient. So let's look at this one. Paul, what do you think? Is this good news or bad news? This is the dependency over the next 2 to 2060 between young people and old people.
Well, I think it's neither good news or bad news. It's a reality that we have to face, that the dependency patterns are changing, and there's no question that we all have to learn to deal with the fact that there are going to be fewer and fewer young people rising up to having income sufficient to take care of the elderly population, who become more and more dependent on the income from younger people. And that's a serious problem for funding the services that we need, but more importantly for giving a quality of life to the elderly population as we see more aging people in the population.
So for all but about 3 people in this room, this has tremendous meaning. And those 3 people are going to be helping us, the rest of us, right? How do you feel about that? Just think about that. No answer necessary. Okay, here's an interesting one. I'm going to ask Vernon to jump in on this. This is called the disparity of opportunity. This has to do with that income ladder, of the ability of someone in the bottom of the income hierarchy to make it up into the topper levels. In other words, to improve their life economically, which means a lot of good things, right? So Vernon, what do you think this means for our country?
We need to have something in the Southeast United States. There you go. I think it really, it really speaks to the kind of our responsibility to tie educational opportunity as we work with communities of need.
When I show a vision line, show a picture of this, oh, go ahead. Yeah, okay. So the darker the color, okay, essentially means it's harder for a child who is in the bottom third of the income ladder to get up into the top third. You know, so take a look at the places that are bright yellow. These are places that are good. So, I mean, the winner of this, from a data standpoint, is San Jose, California. Now, what a surprise that is, right? It says that if you happen to be born in the middle class in San Jose, California, your chances of moving up, if you're a poor child, up into the upper echelon is darn good. All those dark red spots mean that if you're down there in the same place that the San Jose kid was, you're not going to make it. And we talked yesterday and the last couple of days about what the lack of income, when this income disparity thing. So this is getting worse, not better. But the important thing is it's not random. It's not a random act of anything. What this is beginning to reveal to us is that our solutions, we're going to have to be careful when we choose our solution, listening to the best speaker, the most pervasive speaker on the podium, unless we're also looking at a picture like this, because it should telegraph a message to us that says, oh, that may not exactly be what the situation is I face.
No, it also shows, in my mind, a lot of cultural attributes. If you look at concentrations, it's clear, in my mind, that there's cultural views that are also enforcing these in different areas, because you're seeing continuous swaths of colors in many cases, which would indicate, in my mind, a certain amount of social, very strong social component, political component. Can't bear.
Yes. Yeah, so blurt louder.
In my mind, this also shows the social political connection here, because these continuous swaths indicate something, and you would expect what they indicate is reinforcement of attitudes that allow these kinds of patterns, right? So it's not really random. I mean, which I find hopeful. If it's not random, that means there's something we can do about it.
The lesson here is not to make you a student of the whole country. It's to say you've got to get into this kind of visualization so you don't go to the wrong conference in the wrong place, solving the wrong problem. I mean, I love Nick. Nick is one of my heroes. But how many San Diegos are there in the United States of America? There's not that many of them. And I would say, do they have the same problems in your city that they have in? Yeah. But I would just say, go to San Diego, spend some time, and you'll find out there's not many San Diegos. So the problem I'm trying to say is you have to start integrating this kind of view of your world at the same time so you actually get the right people working on the right problem.
Bill?
Yes, Paul?
I think it says something else. I think in the future, we're going to have to focus the work of human services on uplifting the economic conditions in some of those areas that have that low opportunity, because a lot of that color is dictated by the local economic state. For example, those yellow parts of California are around Silicon Valley, as you just pointed out. Lots of opportunities for high-paying jobs. There's not a lot of Silicon Valleys in Alabama. And the opportunities for employment and the opportunities for jumping past that. And I think what it says for the future is we're going to have to be thinking more about how do we stimulate economic growth to provide those jobs, to increase those incomes, and to deal with the income inequalities, which is driving so many of the other problems in the human services.
So this site is at the New York Times, and if you go explore the New York Times, you can get this interactive map, and it's quite good. That's good research that's backed up. Was there anybody else that wanted to blurt out something? Yes, just blurt it out. Well, it is adjusted. It's already adjusted for that. So it's just saying, assume everything else is equal, and it's just saying you're going to struggle as a young person if you're in one of those darker colored areas.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but West Virginia looks pretty darn good there.
Yeah.
And as we talk about economics and, jobs, and I mean, that's one of those areas where I would have expected a lot of work.
So, there's two things on this chart that are happening at the same time. One is the absolute difference from the high to the low, and then the other one is the gradients between each of those steps. So what you'll find when you go to this article, they'll say, while there's stability in the bottom to the top, where the instability is occurring is the size of the step, okay, to reach that next level. So you got to go to this site, and you can explore and drill down even deeper and get more granularity as you interact with this. Yes, over here at this table? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, it just meant no data. Yeah, there was some issue with the data, and it's just blocked out. Okay, now what in the world could this possibly say, Paul, that would have anything to do with human services? These are all the people that have been gun deaths since Newtown. Okay? So, I mean, we all think that was an isolated event, right? And here's the map. Paul, what does that say to you?
Well, I really think this is an incredibly important symbolic description of the importance of figuring out how to interact between the worlds of justice and law enforcement, health and human services, because many of these points of reference have an intersection with health and human services. A lot of the people behind those guns were mentally ill. And we know that from not only the stories in the press, but from the data that shows how many shootings are getting involved with people who are under the care or supervision of health or human services. It's not only the offenders, but the victims. And there was a very interesting statistical presentation in the Washington Post a few days ago showing that 3/4 of all the guns that were used in shootings were legally obtained. And they're legally obtained because the federal law, Brady Act, that requires checking to see if a person is on the list that should not be allowed to buy guns, is not being effective throughout most of the country. Until the shooting of Virginia Tech, the state of Virginia didn't really report to the national instant check system those people in Virginia who were mentally adjudicated to be mentally ill and therefore barred by the act from buying a gun. So the shooter there was freely able to, even though he had been mentally adjudicated, or adjudicated mentally ill, he was quite capable of buying all the guns anybody would sell. It's the story goes on and on. But it's the number of shootings has also become a very interesting figure even to law enforcement. Commissioner Ramsey in Philadelphia says he's no longer interested in counting homicides because that's just an accident of how good the aim of the shooter is and our ability to triage. But homicides are going down in Philadelphia, shootings are going up. You know, and a good percentage of these shootings are drive-by shootings in major cities that are, you know, occurring by people and to people who are involved in the health and human services world in many ways. They're happening in the poorest parts of town with the, you know, young children sitting on the steps on a hot summer night and getting shot by an errant bullet that's aimed at somebody in the house. So that affects the cost of care. It affects our ability to care for the families that are left behind, the victims themselves, when they're not killed and they're injured for the rest of their lives. This really shows the importance of thinking about the enterprise of how we're dealing with health, human services, and justice, not just about any one of those domains, because they are inextricably linked in this terrible event of shootings and particularly death.
So what I want to ask you, does this resonate with anybody in these markets?
Does this show all gun deaths or only homicides?
All gun deaths, not just homicides.
Then I want to point out to everyone that in general, there's about 30,000 gun deaths in America every year. 18,000 of those are suicides. 12,000 are homicides, approximately.
Yeah, so my question to myself was, and to the panel, so how could possibly an image like this have anything to do with human services IT?
I think when I look at that, I think one of the things is the way that we tell the story. And so often the story has a hole. And I think something like this can be really powerful visually, but you have to have the infrastructure to bring that together. And so, you know, it's like when you hear the news story, I mean, New York Times actually does a great job with a lot of the visualizations. But, you know, usually what we see is we see a statistic or a number. That's the way, especially in medicine and healthcare or in human services, that the information is portrayed. And something like this, I think, would be really powerful because you can see it in one image.
I think this is, can people speak up, please? I think this is incomplete. The reason it's incomplete, I would like to see, what I would like to see is a graph that shows over time, not only the number of shootings, I want to understand who's making money off of guns. Because I think when people see that, and people doing services start seeing these things, then we start understanding some of the policy issues that we have to confront. Trying to address this but not understanding the whole socioeconomic piece of it, it's not going to, that's one of the reasons we're going nowhere.
Right, so here's what I'd say. You know, we have artificially segregated for the purposes of our businesses. We have public safety, we have public health, we have human services, da, 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 da. These are artificial barriers that we have created for ourselves, and by gosh, here's what we do. We collect data in those same buckets, right? And so what these pictures, or what these images should stimulate in you is that, okay, there is a relationship there, okay? So of one of the many things you have to worry about when you're designing systems is, are you prepared also to deal with the individuals who are in the system who are exposed to a great deal of violence, whether it's a homicide or suicide or whatever it is? And the answer is, of course. These are just images to get you stirred up that you have to have this kind of vision. I think we'll move on because we're running out of time. Here's another one. So I'm going to ask Paul to address it. Who did? Don, go ahead. Blur. Don't ask me to back up. I don't think I can do that here.
If you go back to the last screen.
I said, I
You
was
don't know
hoping you
how?
weren't asking me to do, okay.
That's the down button. So what I was going to say about the data, what's missing is they're talking an awful lot about data sharing between health and human services, but the other services are law enforcement and behavior health. And until we connect those links, it's going to be difficult for us to identify those individuals when we stop taking their meds. So some of the concern might be individuals who are having mental issues, but they're on the meds, and suddenly they're off meds. We should be able to catch that through pharmacy information, where all of a sudden it stops. Then that should be a trigger that some individual who has been taking behavioral drugs, no one's taking behavioral drugs, and therefore might be at risk of injuring themselves and someone else.
Right, and we may have to build dashboards that try to answer that problem more elegantly. That we observe this in a more real-time kind of fashion as opposed to after the fact. Yes, sir, in the back, and then we're going to move on to the next slide.
I just wanted to really emphasize the point you made about these edge use cases or interoperability between public health, public safety. You know, these edge use cases get to be pretty interesting, and maybe later on we can come back and see if some of those might be ones that we want to focus on.
Okay. Okay, so, okay, let's look at this one. I'm going to ask Paul to dive into this one. Does it matter what the future holds if more kids don't get a high school diploma? Does that have any impact on what you're designing today for 10 years from now? Paul?
Well, I think it makes a huge difference to understand what that gap is and what it's going to take for people to be successful in the future, as the way that young people today move so quickly to find new devices, to find new ways of communicating, to ignore the past ways. And it's going to take people who have more education to be able to cope in our future times. And those that cannot are going to be more and more the subject of interest for human services and become a cost to society rather than a contributor. So there's an extremely important role for education to step up to, seeing to it that we graduate more students, and the people that remain in poverty will be more and more in the future those who are not receiving even the minimal levels of education.
I keep thinking we ought to move these people to the upper Midwest. People in the 1990 census, the 2000 census, over 25 years of age who had a high school diploma. So lighter, no, lighter means more. Darker means more, lighter means no high school diploma. Pardon? Oh, yeah. I don't know. I clipped that off because it was too big. But I'm just saying, it was took up too much real estate. Right? Now I'm glad to provide as much detail on these as you want and show you. They're actually not created by us or me, they're created by some of you, the research communities that we depend on for this kind of information. What this is really saying, again, is that this isn't a cookie cutter, this isn't homogeneous, and there's going to be some parts of America who have drastically different issues on the same topic, and ideas and thoughts and concerns. But I'm saying the trend, this is a trend. This map isn't getting darker. It's getting, in some places, but it's getting lighter in some places and so forth. So this variability, this geographic variability, is what this is trying to capture. Now, where are you? And I couldn't find a slide that had more than 2 tracks on it. But somewhere along there, you have to figure out where you're going to be when this, I either call it a collaboration, a collision, a convergence. Okay, but tracks are getting closer together, and the trains are moving faster, the scenery's going by faster, and this imposes a great deal of pressure on all of us to find solutions that work in our communities. Now, this is my most favorite slide, but it's also my most famous slide because people ask me for it, so I'm hoping you'll ask me for it. This is an editable slide, and it was inspired by Nick many years ago when he started his campaign in San Diego. And when I first heard it, I said, this is audacious. I mean, this is ridiculous. The campaign in San Diego was 0 strokes. Do you ever remember that? 0 strokes? And as a health person, I said, there's no possible way they could do that in a community. Well, Nick has convinced me that if you plant the seed and if you create the vision and you communicate the vision heartily over a long period of time, you know, you can get even the deepest cynics turned around on it. So I created this slide so people could put their own city in that billboard to show as a slide to people. And you can edit this slide so you can make these things what you want them to be. This happens to be, you know, something that you would probably all agree that you'd like to live in a community that had 0 tolerance for those things I have up there, right? And so what I'm trying to say here, part of your job, in addition to creating these systems and fixing problems and so forth, is use your leadership capacities to start to inspire people. What are we doing this for? What are we working on? And I would say our board really is, we're troublemakers to Daniel. You know, sometimes he wishes he probably didn't know us, right? And it's because we're wounded. Okay, we've been wounded by a lot of years, and the only one that's not up here is Carmen Nardozzi. She's got a lot of arrows in her back and chest, and it's because we've tried to fix these problems, and now suddenly we realize that these problems still exist and they're getting worse. And that's why we're wounded. So we need a lot of tools, and this is just another tool you have to have in your toolkit to inspire people that they're working on the right problems. So here's where we're going to end. Okay, so in my book, there's 2 kinds of people in the world. Okay, they're on this screen here. There's catchers and jumpers, right? And somewhere in your life, you've done both, and you may be doing both today. But you got to decide here, because you don't have much time, do you? That little boy's going to jump, right? And you either get it right. Now, can you imagine a parent that would step aside? I mean, I've heard stories about this. You know, have you ever had a parent say, "I'm going to throw you in the lake, and you're going to either sink or swim," right?
He's only 2 feet off the ground. That's not a giant.
Yeah, yeah.
The kid will be fine. He'll
So transition in your mind. Develop a story around this slide. Develop a story on yourself and the people you're caring for and the systems you're building. Find out which one of these images, and I would say, I mean, I see myself in both of these. I've been there, done there, I'm still there. You know how many people have children still at home and they're 28 or 30 years old? You know, and so this idea of being catchers and jumpers, and what does that tell you? I mean, what does that slide say to you? Panel, what does it scream out? What's going on there?
Trust.
Isn't it all about trust? That's how we learn trust. And if that father steps away, what do you think is going to happen to that young boy for the rest of his life? Now, you think it doesn't have any implications, but it could, couldn't it? So as you build these systems, decide in your head, you know, that you're a catcher and you're working with jumpers. You yourself could be a jumper. And then you have to contribute to tell the catchers what it is that needs to change. And this is what we do in these meetings, right? When we do these personas, we're both trying to identify with the jumper and then put ourselves in the role of the catcher. What do we need to build here to really make this a more effective kind of environment? So I'd say, which one of these futures are you representing here today as we talk? A jumper or a catcher? Does your vision Is it big enough and inclusive enough that you can get both of these into your vision? And can you tell a story about it? Because that's what people want to really hear about what it is you do. They could care less about your IT problems. Will the system you design today meet the needs just 5 years from now? In that case, you know, my observation is these jumpers are changing very quickly, very rapidly, but that may be true for past generations. So squint, peek, squint into the future, and then be willing to blurt out how you feel about it. I think the Google engineers were kind of great about blurting out, weren't they? Yeah, I heard things that I never thought I would hear come out of any software engineer's mouth about what's wrong with the way we're doing things today. And at the same time, it was shocking. At the same time, it was really refreshing. So we all hope we're going to continue to keep pressure on Daniel to keep these things so you do get some tools, but at the same time, we want you also to stand back, reflect a little bit, use some of your leadership, develop some leadership talents and communication talents that begin to inspire the people that you're talking to about all these problems. Make it simpler for your audiences to really understand what you're really trying to get your hands around. And become a student of graphic communication so that it stays with people and they memorize it and they think back about it and it inspires them to get out of the rut. So, last comments, anybody?
I want to take the liberty of just expanding a little bit on Kathleen's comment on this gun shooting issue, because I think it really illustrates the importance of us having data to think about the future and think about what we have to do to respond to it. There are no real good national statistics on shootings in this country. We have approximations by a few things, but for example, the Uniform Crime Reports, which is the basis for us collecting data on crimes reported to the police, doesn't count shootings. There's nothing in there to measure how much we have as a national, local, state, or local problem. And the data from other sources and other data sets is not comparable with what's in UCR. So if we're going to be, as we heard yesterday, we have to be asking the right questions. We have to build those systems that produce the data that help us get to the point of insight into how we need to change. And that focus on asking the right questions and collecting the data so we know what we're doing and we are able to measure the success of all the programs we introduce is just, I think, one of the most critical things that this entire community has to do in the next 2 to 3 years.
Let's get that done in the next couple of weeks. Sid, do you have a final comment?
No, I'm ready to move.
I'm convinced that we need to create collaborative models, and we need to partner with the consumer to have the consumer be able to self-direct the service. And that the reality is that there isn't enough money to be able to find the ultimate service delivery system. We have to be able to create strength in those communities in order for individuals to be able to respond to that.